Welcome everybody, Jim Thornton here, another Toromont podcast. Today we're going to talk about bucket choice matters. We want you to work smart with smart choices. We want to give you the best return from your bucket choice. And this kind of applies to wheel loaders and excavators, really any bucket machine. So here's a good statistic for you to start off. The wrong bucket can cost you 10 to 20% in terms of productivity. That's a big number.
That is a big number.
Especially today, we talk about every advantage counts. We try and preach about machine control and guidance. We talk about all the advantages to try and make sure you can be more competitive on the job and bidding the job. We need to spend the time in the iron to make sure we have that set up correctly in the first place.
So you're saying that I can spend all the time to bid the job, have it right dialed into the exact queue where I got to be, but if I got the wrong bucket, I could be like 20% less efficient than
Absolutely,
I should be?
Brian.
Wow.
Absolutely. So we have to address this. Got to make sure you have the right one. So whether you rent or buy, because that's sometimes different positions you're in, spend the time on the bucket selection. I'll tell you right now, it may be worthwhile if you're renting something to make sure you have the right tool. Don't just take what they give you. There's a big difference. Let's talk through some of those. So here's the big question. What comes first, Brian? The machine selection or the bucket selection?
Well, it's got to be the machine.
You know what? That's exactly what everybody would tell us. That's, you know what? Well, I have a machine in my fleet. This is what I have to work with. And you know what? I get it. But we need to turn that logic on its head a little bit. We need to peel the banana from the bottom up. You like that one, eh? So here we're going to look at is let's look at the bucket and let's see what we have to address with a bucket to make sure it's sized right or selected right for the machine or application we're working with. So what's the first thing we need to look at? First thing we have to look at is what is the density range of materials we're going to be playing with? What kind of material is it? Is it clay? Is it earth? Is it rock? Is it snow? How abrasive is it? Because that's going to determine how well armored that bucket needs to be to give us an acceptable life. But that's also weight. So let's keep that in mind. So that's the first thing we need to look at. What are we playing with? What are we working with? What material is it? But then you have to look at is what are we loading? Are you loading trucks? Are you loading some kind of a hopper? What is its capacity? How many loads per day? How much do you need to move in a day for that target? Once you've that figured out, then you have to ask yourself, well, what's number 3? What bucket gives you that ideal pass match? Now, I said a magic word here. It's called pass match. Now, Brian has spoken about this in a previous podcast about pass matches with excavators, and I can't stress enough the importance with pass matching. Give you a quick example here. If you were loading something and it was going to take you 2.2 passes because of your bucket size to get that vehicle or hopper full, that's still 3 times back and forth. So sizing that bucket to give you 3 equal passes is going to save you fuel. It's going to save you energy and wear and tear to get the job done because it takes the same amount of time. Why don't you size it so you can cycle maybe a little bit faster or burn a little bit less fuel?
No guesswork on the third pass.
Exactly. You don't have to just trickle it in a little bit to make sure you don't overload it. Just swing 3 times, throw it in. 3 passes and you're done. Pass match is absolutely critical when you try and maximize the efficiency of your operation. Spend the time there. So if you've got the material, you know what you're loading, you know what bucket gives you that pass match you're looking for, guess what? It's time to size a bucket to a machine now. So we've kind of turned it on its head. But a lot of times you can work with the current machine you have and just kind of tweak it a little bit if required. So whether that be a 4-yard bucket, a 3.5, or a 3.25, that difference in an excavator, in a wheel loader, makes a huge difference to your overall productivity. So we start looking along all these different options and are anything that impact that. Any other factors that can play into the bucket selection?
Question.
All right, flag on the play. What's up, Brian?
Well, what about a quick coupler on either an excavator or on a wheel loader? How does that play into the bucket selection?
That's a great question, Brian. There are pros and cons to quick couplers. So we'll deal with the pros first of all. The pros are, let's say you already have a machine and you own it, right? You have a bucket for rock, and you have a bucket for ditching, and you have a bucket for truck loading that's matched to your fleet of trucks. There's a great example of where a quick coupler hits a home run because it gives you that flexibility to move things around. Okay, quickly change between tools to have the right tool for the job. The downside to a quick coupler is you have potentially, for example, I think on a 336 size excavator, it's about, I think, 1,100 pounds. It's not light. You're swinging that around all the time on the end of the stick. You know what? That's fuel. That's work the machine has to do. So here's a good rule of thumb with excavators specifically. and quick couplers. If you're going to a job for an extended period of time and you know it's going to be consistently truck loading or doing some job, for example, maybe 3, 4, 5 months, and you know it's going to have the same tool on it, spend the time and take the coupler off. You're just going to save yourself some fuel, and you're going to save yourself some wear and tear and get a little bit more production. So good tip there. Thanks, Brian. Good question. Another one we commonly come across is, well, you just want to push the envelope just a little bit. You want a competitive advantage. So you want to have maybe the bucket's supposed to be 5, I want a 5.5. Or it's supposed to be 4, you want a 4.25, 4.5.
How big a bucket can I have?
How often do we hear that one? I want the biggest bucket possible. So, you know what? I know you're trying to get an advantage. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen because we see it all the time. But let's talk about what the downside to that is. Yes, you may get an incremental improvement in productivity, but you're going to be sacrificing fuel efficiency. We'll talk about that a little later. And you're going to be sacrificing wear and tear on the tractor. So accelerated wear is probably a good way to look at it. It's not free is the bottom line. There is a downside to it. You need to pay attention to that. And you need to do a bit of a cost benefit. Say, is this worth it in the long run for me to be pushing the envelope beyond the design parameters from the original equipment manufacturer? And for heaven's sakes, as a wrap up here with bucket choice, make sure you have new sharp GET on that bucket, because it is going to be the tool that penetrates the material, and it's the biggest impact to your fuel message. That's it. That's all we have for Bucket Choice Matters. If you want to make up that 10 to 20%, spend the time making sure you have the right bucket on the front of your tool.